And we're live. All right, welcome back to another Gutter Fighting Secrets Tactical Podcast. This is going to be Tactical Podcast number 21. Today, we're coming at you with Phillip from Neuse River Tactical. Now, Phillip is a really interesting guy. He's got 17 years of law enforcement experience working as a patrol officer, a court bailiff, school resource officer. Now, during his law enforcement career, he has had several instances where proper mindset has prepared him for incidents and also helped him to overcome and thrive. Phillip's been a firearms instructor as well, and he owns Neuse River Tactical. Since 2013, he's been at it. They're doing big things. They're going to keep doing big things. And the courses that they offer are actually quite interesting. He also teaches defensive handgun courses, active shooter courses, church security courses, which I find interesting. And he's located in eastern North Carolina. He is set up to travel and customize courses for guys and girls out there who want to kind of get that extra edge with their tactical capabilities. And he's kind of able and willing to work with pretty much every level of shooter out there, whether beginner, advanced. Phillip kind of can run the gamut as far as that goes. So, Phillip, I want to welcome you on the Tactical Podcast, man, and thank you for coming on, dude.
Thank you, Will.
So, we're talking about mindset right here, man, and this is something that I think is so crucial for all first responders to understand, but also just for your average, guy and girl out there walking around, the upstanding citizen, to really get through their heads is that mindset, in my personal opinion, will kind of be the give and take whether you come out alive or possibly not. How do you feel about mindset? How do we train our mindset, and how do we kind of walk around with a little extra edge on us when it comes to thinking about how to stay stay safe out there on the streets?
First of all, thanks for having me on here. But as far as mindset, it's one of those you don't really find a class on mindset. Everybody's offering handgun classes, medical classes, but mindset is one of those things that's really hard to teach. And what I explain to people, if I'm going to teach a class on mindset, it's basically situational awareness. And I know that that's a big term, just like mindset, but be aware of your surroundings. As far as mindset training, read books on OODA loop. The acronym, observe, orient, decide, and act. But as far as mindset, it's something you have to think, you have to run those scenarios through your head, the what if. And we can what if, all day long, but think about what you see on the news. Put yourself in that scenario as far as if that had happened to me, how would I deal with it? So when something does happen, you've already thought about how you're going to handle it. So it's like working out, working your brain.
Yeah, and
that's one of the hardest things to train.
Well, that's a great point. Is that mindset is like working out. Having a tactical awareness is like working out. You have to work your mind out as well as your body. And so few guys out there really do that. And you mentioned that you think it's not really offered out there as far as situational awareness, and it is, I think, something that you have to learn as you go, learn on the job or in the street or whatever it is. Did they give you guys a lot of kind of training or any really training on mindset in the academy?
Speaking of the academy, I remember it was either when I went through our academy here in North Carolina, it's called the Basic Law Enforcement Training, BLET or BLET, or you can call it the Police Academy. I remember it was either our first or second night, I went to a night academy here in North Carolina. They offer a day academy. It's approximately 4 months long, Monday through Friday. Kind of a 9 to 5 type schedule, and then you have a night academy, and that's typically for somebody that may be working a job, kind of going to a night school, and that's Monday through Friday, kind of like a 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., and that's about 7 months long. To get the same hours, just takes a little bit longer. But anyway, so my first or second night, I remember the director played a video. I believe it was a South Carolina trooper. Where it was a traffic stop, and he ended up getting shot. I think one time in the shoulder with a .22 caliber, and he shot the suspect probably 5-6 times, center mass with a .357, and the trooper ended up dying. I think it was mid to late 90s when it happened. And well, anyway, that they showed the video from his dash cam and the audio, and you could literally hear him dying on the side of the road, screaming for help over the radio. And I think we had one or two people, in the class get up, and they left. Mm-hmm. And never saw them again. So, I mean, they pretty much quit within the first week from that one video. And that right there lets you know, I mean, it's just like I tell people, as far as like, do you think you're cut out for something? Sometimes you don't know until you try it.
Yeah.
Like paramedics and being around the blood and guts. They say, how do you get a strong stomach, or how do you keep from throwing up? Either you're wired that way or you're not. Some things you may have an issue dealing with and you can overcome it, but either you're cut out for it or you're not. I've heard several people say either you're meant to be the police or you're meant to call the police.
Huh.
And we don't say that. I don't say that in a disrespectful way, but not everybody's cut out. Like, I'm not cut out to do certain things, other jobs, and I don't expect everybody to be qualified or cut out to do what we do in law enforcement.
Yeah, and it's funny, you gave me a flashback there as well, because I went to a night academy also for the fire department, fire academy, and it was the same deal, man. A couple of days into it, they played a couple of videos for us where you saw kind of graphically firefighters dying and stuff, and guys just got up and left. And through the training, guys would just freak out, maybe with the mask or whatever it was, and wouldn't hack it. And they said the same thing to us. You're either cut out for this job or you're not. Now, that brings up a question that I kind of had written down here, man, is officer safety. And is there a way that you think that we could improve officer safety through situational awareness training, maybe giving guys a little bit of extra in the academy, or even supplemental training on the job?
As far, I mean, it's been when I went through the academy. I started in August of 2002 and graduated March of 2003. So it's been a while since I've been through the academy. I don't teach at an academy level, so I get new guys that come to our agency, and I've talked to them, and I'll ask them certain things as far as, are they still doing this or are they doing that? And they've changed a lot of stuff because the times have changed,
mm-hmm.
Especially like active shooter. The simunitions weren't used in 2002 and 2003. They were around, but we didn't use them. I think they're used now. So, I mean, I think the training is probably better now as far as officer safety. But I really can't answer as far as what. Basically, the instructors, they have a course curriculum. It's written by the state, it's mandated. But the benefit of those instructors is they can, just like with any course, you can add to the curriculum. You just can't take away from it. And right. I think where those students would benefit is depending on their instructor, what experiences do they have? Are they just telling war stories, to build themselves up and to sound cool? Or are they actually giving those new recruits, sound advice of this is what happened, admit your faults, admit, this is where we screwed up, but this is how we survived that incident. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, 100%. And I agree with you about the war story thing, man. There are guys that just kind of do that, but there has to be a point behind it.
I mean, I like to hear a good war story every once in a while too, and most of them are kind of funny because you're like, I really screwed up on that one. But just like with any mistake, if you learn from it, and unfortunately in this line of work, sometimes your mistakes can cost you your life or your partner's life or a life of a victim, sometimes. But if you learn from those close calls and not make that mistake twice. Speaking of, you were talking about mindset. I took a class probably this time last year. There was a class called Tactical Mindset. It was a one-day class. I think it's a 2-day class now. The guy that teaches it is a retired SWAT officer from a large agency in North Carolina, and basically it's not necessarily a day of war stories, but it is specific incidents that he's been involved with as far as shootings and stuff, and he kind of claims the mistakes. Hey, this is what happened. This is how we survived. Don't be afraid to talk to people afterwards. This is what to expect during those high stress situations. And that's really so it's a class on mindset, which is hard to teach.
Yeah.
But the best way to teach mindset is from the mistakes of others.
Yeah, and speaking of which, man, and I don't want to misconstrue here, but you're talking about mindset and learning from other people's experience. You were involved in a couple of incidents yourself where
Yes.
force had been necessary. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that went down? What maybe you learned from it?
So the first incident, I think you're talking about the two incidents that we spoke about. The first one was in November of 2012. I was here, and every agency is different, but at this specific agency that I worked at, we were authorized to work an off-duty job. And when I say off-duty job, so it's in the capacity of, it was with the sheriff's office, so full police powers as far as, I was in uniform, marked patrol car. It was at a late-night establishment, a food place, where people get out of the club. When you get out of the club, you go to this food place, hang out, eat whatever. Well, this particular night, we get paid, our hourly rate, and we were scheduled to work from midnight till 5 in the morning. From midnight to about 2:30, 3 o'clock is typically not that crowded. When the club's let out, that's when the crowd gets there. On this specific night, it was me and another officer were working. So I'll say, me and my partner were working, and we were standing inside the door, crowded. I think there was probably 30 people standing inside, either waiting to be seated or already sat down. The parking lot was full of vehicles. There was probably 75 to 100 people just kind of loitering outside, which was nothing that was uncommon. So it was just kind of another day at the office. And, I heard some screaming, yelling, stepped outside, and literally in the parking lot off to the left were two guys facing each other, and I don't remember the exact distance, but they were several feet away from each other, just shooting at each other in a parking lot.
Damn.
And at that time, I knew my partner was close by, but I didn't know exactly, was he behind me, beside me, but just kind of, that tunnel vision, I kind of take cover behind the corner of a wall, draw my gun, peek back out. They're still shooting, pop, shooting at each other. And so I, yell, sheriff's office, drop the gun. Well, the guy to my left, or to the left side of where I'm facing, he takes off running, and he's with several other guys, so they just kind of scatter. Well, the guy to the right, which is kind of in front of me, probably 30, 40 feet, if I remember correctly, is still facing in the direction of the guy that he was shooting at. And he's still got his gun raised. And, as I'm screaming, sheriff's office, drop the gun, I'm closing the gap, walking towards him. He proceeds to get in the vehicle, door still open, turns kind of away from me, so I don't really see him or the gun anymore at that point. And I'm probably, by that time, I'd screamed sheriff's office dropped the gun probably at least a half dozen times, and get about 8 or 9 feet from him, and he turns like his left side of his body. So if you picture yourself sitting in the driver's seat of a vehicle, his left leg, the left side of his body was kind of out of the vehicle, so it was halfway in, halfway out. Mm-hmm. And the next thing I remember is he turned and faced me, and in his right hand, he still had a handgun in his hand, and that's when I shot several times, and then I remember sidestepping to basically kind of get out, because me and him were just kind of face to face. I shot several times and then sidestepped to kind of change my, not necessarily trajectory, but just to kind of get out of the way. And he still had the handgun in his hand, so I shot a few more times. I think total, I found out, I think I shot 6 times. And if I remember everything correctly, I think I shot 3 times the first initial shot. Then I sidestepped to where now I was to the right side, kind of facing towards the back of the driver's side back door, and I shot 3 more times. At that point, the gun kind of fell out of his hand, and he just kind of went into, just kind of went limp into the vehicle. I remember getting on the radio. To myself, I sounded like I was screaming, but I remember later I was told, I was pretty calm on the radio. But I remember calling, shots fired. I don't remember exactly what was said after that. As far as I remember saying, EMS was needed. I can't remember if I said, subject down. I just remember shots fired, and I called for EMS, and I kept saying the scene was not safe, because I just didn't want EMS just to roll up there. Anyway, so there was a large crowd out there. So officer safety at that point was ridiculously crazy, because there were so many people, and it was just me and one other officer. It seemed like eternity, before other officers got there. And but they got there, obviously within a timely manner, and helped secure the scene. Then it was established when the supervisor, when somebody got there, I was like, hey, I'm the one that, this is what happened. I confronted this guy. I shot. Then they kind of took me away, and then it was investigated. Here in North Carolina, anytime an officer is involved in a shooting, it's investigated by the State Bureau of Investigations, or what we call the SBI. And so they come and it's treated like a crime scene. And that's the way that it should be. I mean, to get a fair, investigation as far as from every angle of it. That was 2012.
Okay. And you were subsequently cleared of that.
Yeah. So, and I can't, like I said, I can't speak for every state, but the SBI investigated it. They provide the case file to the district attorney, and then it's ultimately up to him to either, proceed with, some kind of criminal charge, or no, it was justified, and it was told to me that everything was good to go. And so, yeah, I guess if you could use the term cleared, there was just, I wasn't charged with anything. So,
yeah. Now, what is it like dealing with the aftermath of a shooting? There's a lot, I'm sure, that's going through your mind, in the hours, days, and even weeks following. Can you give guys out there a little piece of advice or a little bit of your personal experience as kind of what that might be like as far as the aftermath of a justified shooting?
Yeah, so, I've heard guys prior to that shooting and then after, say, oh, if A, B, or C happens to me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And prior to that, I would say I was one of those guys. You always think that this is what you're going to do presented with that, and most of the time you may. But until you're presented with that, you're really unsure. And then once it happens, you're like, well, daggone that, I did pretty good. I did what I thought I was going to do. And that's where, like I said earlier, playing certain scenarios. Now, obviously, you can't pick every scenario specifically to the detail of, say, that incident and play it out. But, and I'm not saying, that I've shot multiple people in my head, playing different scenarios, but I explained to somebody, I was telling a story to somebody, and obviously, if I could change certain things, there may be some things that I would do a little bit different. But as far as the outcome, I mean, I did what I was trained to do. I did what I think I was supposed to do, and then ultimately, I was cleared. But telling this guy multiple times, at least a half dozen times over walking, 40 feet, sheriff's office, put down the gun, sheriff's office, put down the gun. I've done that before. And you know what they did? They put down the gun. So in my mind that night, he was supposed to put down that gun after the second, third, and even fourth time that I told him. Like, it wasn't supposed to go down the way that it did. But at what point, how many times do you tell somebody to do something before there are consequences, whether negative or positive? Whether you're a parent telling your kids to go clean your room. Go clean your room. I mean, how many times do you have to tell them before there's consequences? Whether it's punishment, spanking, taking something from them. At some point, there's got to be consequences. And so as far as, I wouldn't change the way anything. I mean, I wish it didn't go down the way it did. As far as the aftermath, it was a lot of things happened that I wasn't prepared for. Now, since then, I think that tactical mindset class, like I was telling you earlier, when I took it, it was a one-day class. And I took it after this particular incident. But I've talked to somebody that's taken it since I've taken it. They said it's a 2-day class now. And in that class, they talk about how to deal with like a critical incident, like what to expect afterwards. And I'm like, man, I wish I had that class 10 years ago or 17 years ago. So I think now officers are maybe getting a little bit more mindset classes that we didn't have, 15, 20 years ago. But as far as the aftermath, I think like the next day, like 1 minute, and I can't remember the exact time frame. It was probably 3 days. So this incident happened. It was Sunday's date, but it was Saturday night, after midnight when it happened. So Sunday I went home, loved, hugged on my family. But like that Monday morning, 1 minute I was like pissed off at the guy. Like, why'd you make me do this? And then the next day I was like pissed off at myself. Like, why did I do this? And then another minute is like you're sad. Like, I can't believe I did this. And I'm a pretty, I'm a Christian. I'm saved. I grew up in the church. But at that time, I wasn't going to church. Since me and my wife had been together, we just didn't go to church. Like I said, this was end of 2012. And it's funny, but it's not funny. Around that same time, I started reading the Bible. I'm like, you say, thou shalt not kill. And I'm like, crap, am I going to go to hell? So then I started doing research on, and this isn't for everybody, so I'm not, preaching or, pushing religion on anybody, but I started reading the Bible more than I had, in 10 years prior to that. And found that there is scripture that backs law enforcement, our job, to the point, including taking the life of somebody else, as far as the good versus evil.
Yeah.
As far as it being justified. So that ultimately is what, I hate to use the term healed me, but that's what kind of gave me peace with, okay, everything's good to go. Like, I was cleared from an earthly law standpoint, from the district attorney, but now I feel I'm at peace with, the Lord, that I did do the right thing. And as far as traumatic, I hate to use the word, PTSD or anything like that. I mean, I've never been a sleep all the way night person anyway, so I really don't think it's affected me because I've always worked swing schedules and stuff like that. But I mean, I have good days and bad days. I mean, that's probably with anybody in law enforcement, even that if they haven't had, to take somebody's life or, involved in a critical incident. I mean, I actually think more about the kids I see on the domestic when their parents just are acting the fool and drunk, beating on each other. I think about that more than the fact of having to shoot somebody.
Yeah, and so, you bring up a really...
And I don't mean to say, and I'm not trying to sound callous about it, but the kids, children, little animals, they're the true victims because they can't help situations they're put in, so...
No, not at all. And, you bring up a great point about the moral aspect of it as well. And that's, I think, something that probably every man has to face for himself afterwards and also kind of mentally prepare themselves for beforehand. Being in your line of work is an extremely dangerous line of work. And, you bring up the Bible and everything. And, we read in the Bible about, David and, he was a warrior. He slew, quite a few enemies himself, and, thou shalt not kill. And, you look at the Hebrew translation, maybe it was actually thou shalt not murder, and things like that. But, being a warrior is that's...
And that's what I had to find out doing that research, that it wasn't just thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
It was the malicious murder of, a serial killer or just somebody just killing somebody because they don't like them.
Right.
You obviously have the right to protect yourself, but I had to research that for myself.
And I think that's something...
myself at ease.
Absolutely. And I think that's something, every man has to account for in his own right, but that really, I think, is what makes a warrior and not just, a criminal or someone who's opportunistic, is that, a warrior like yourself, Phillip, doesn't want that to happen, and you said that several times, that it wasn't supposed to go down like that. You didn't want that to happen.
Yeah,
that's the last thing.
When I go to work on oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, and that was just my point, is that you didn't want this to happen, and that was the last thing you wanted to happen. And, like I said, that's what makes a warrior versus, somebody else, is you were trying to avoid that from happening, but unfortunately it transpired the way it did.
Yep.
So... you are able to take away a lot of lessons from that, and, there's nothing good about it. But the one thing that we can take away from is that you can now sit here with us, not only your students at Neuse River Tactical, but also with us, and give us lessons that are actually quite valuable to the other warriors out there.
Yeah, and, without telling war stories, when I'm teaching just a basic North Carolina concealed carry class, a one-day class, with the curriculum, it's an 8-hour one-day class. You have classroom, and then you have to shoot, a minimum 30-round qualification course. But in that curriculum, as I'm giving them, reading the general statutes and giving them scenarios, hey, if you're in a Walmart parking lot and ABC happens, then this is how you can legally respond. This is maybe how you should probably tactically respond. Just because you can do certain things doesn't mean that may be the best way to do it. Legally you can, but sometimes we're going to look at the totality of the circumstances. You may not have to retreat under certain circumstances, but taking 2 or 3 steps to the right to get behind cover is not necessarily retreating due to the law stating you do or don't. That's more of a tactical retreat or a tactical move to put yourself in a better position. Sometimes just moving a few feet to the side behind cover can save your life and then ultimately save the life of the attacker. And that's where I take my experiences on and off duty And when I teach these classes, I'm like, hey, this happened to me, or this hasn't happened to me, but I've responded to that call. This is how I've seen people respond negatively to this behavior. And then this is how citizens have responded positively to that behavior. And then not only survived, but because anybody can survive. You think about surviving out in the woods is barely getting by.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to just survive. You want to be able to thrive through that hardship or that incident and come out better, not just surviving. Because, you could be on a ventilator in ICU and you survived the fight, but how are you doing your family any good?
Right.
So there's a difference in surviving an incident and then actually making it through and thriving through the other side. So.
Yeah, and you bring up, thriving through an incident and not just surviving it, which I think is actually quite brilliant. And that brings up another question I had for you in the first place is training and how can we improve our training? Either at the range, whether it be static shooting a target, or even if you've got kind of more of an open range, or even just martial arts. How do we improve our mindset through training, and then also how do we train better to ultimately overcome and thrive through a situation?
Well, with any kind of training, I look at it, I go the route of crawl, walk, run. So if I teach, just a basic like defensive handgun class, it's all day out at the range. The first, we do our safety briefing. We go over, the firearm safety rules, kind of the range rules, what's expected as far as safety. Beyond those 4 basic rules, we go over a medical briefing. If, God forbid, if one of y'all, something as simple as spraining an ankle, to getting bit by, stepping in an ant bed, up to, somebody getting shot. This is this is where the trauma kit is. This is where our first aid kit is. They're together, but they're separate. And let me know if something happens. We'll deal with it accordingly. This is the protocol as far as somebody called 911. This is the location we're at. If we can treat and respond ourselves, we'll do that. And so after we go through that, 20-minute kind of introductions, then empty guns on the firing line, and we practice. And this is just like I said, just a defensive handgun class. We do dry fire in front of a target. Everybody's in front of their target, and we'll do, step 1, getting that master grip. Step 2, clearing the holster. Step 3, center line of the body. Step 4, press out, trigger squeeze. And we'll do that and I'll tell them, like, look, you're getting ready to be bored for about 15 minutes. But you can do this at home. It doesn't cost anything. And some of the best shooters do this all the time. Because a lot of probably 90% of the people most everybody that takes our concealed carry class typically has never even been around a gun, or their dad, took them to shoot a gun, 30 years ago, where they've been hunting, but they've never carried a handgun. And then kind of that next process in this training evolution would be that defensive handgun class. So you've got a gun, you ain't got your concealed carry permit, now what? And so, if you're a woman carrying a pocketbook, or somebody carrying on the ankle, or you're going to carry appendix or on your waist, that's how I want you to carry when you come to this class. But the first 15, 20 minutes, we're just dry firing. But it's the full, 4 steps, getting on target, and then going those 4 steps in reverse, putting back in the holster. And that's that crawl. They're crawling. And then, okay, insert a magazine. We'll do that same thing for another 15 minutes, but we're only firing 1 round. So you get step 4, press out, fire 1 round. In reverse, holster. You're not in a hurry to holster. And we're not in a hurry to get out either. We're kind of doing it by the numbers almost. Mm-hmm. And I explained to him, like, well, I'm not here to insult anybody's intelligence, or talk to you like you're kindergarten, but I'm just trying to lay it out to a basic level. Once everybody starts to get comfortable, and I see that, fingers off the trigger without having to be, told to several times, then we'll go and we'll fire 2 rounds. kind of back to back, and then we'll start doing shooting and moving, and it's not necessarily, well, this is how you do it, but this is why we're doing this particular drill. We'll have barrels set up, and we'll go over cover and concealment. And so it's a class, it's on private property, a lot of indoor ranges or what I would say public ranges. They have certain rules. You can't shoot from a holster, or you can't do a lot of moving and whatnot. But obviously we're doing everything safe. But being on private property, we have a little bit more latitude as far as what we can do. But so the crawl, walk, run. Crawl, we're doing the dry fire. Walking, we're starting to shoot the different drills. And then the run stage, we're not literally running, but towards lunchtime and then for the rest of the day, we're doing more scenario-based. Okay, we've got 4 targets set up. You're moving from point A to point B. You're going to shoot the 4 targets. And I remind them, these aren't 4 separate people or 4 separate, bad guys. It's one guy running or moving or coming at you. And so that's where I explain, this is a scenario of why you may have to use this drill. And they're not just stuff that I've been through. I mean, like I said, I've only been in 2, use of force as far as, with a firearm. But it's scenarios that are on the news. It's scenarios that people I know have been through them. They're scenarios I've, responded to. So, I mean, they're kind of real life scenarios. It's nothing that I just, saw on YouTube and, hey, that looks cool, so let's do it. They're reality based, scenarios. And that's our 1-day class. And then we have like an advanced, and I hate to use the term advanced because there's really nothing advanced about it. It's just once you master those basics, then you can advance to other scenarios. And so it's more of a marketing, but the advanced defensive handgun class, a lot of the same scenarios, but you're shooting more one-handed, offhand, more of injured shooter type, like, okay, here's your scenario, here's your drill, here's your round count. On the command to fire, you'll fire, you'll go through the process. And, oh, by the way, you just got shot in your right arm. Here's a tourniquet. And then prior to this, we've gone over just basic level. Here's how and why you would apply a tourniquet, as far as Israeli bandages. Now, just those 2 simple things. And then we'll run those scenarios, one-handed, offhand, malfunction drills, one-handed, more of an austere, environment as far as not being quite as comfortable standing on a static range. But at some point, you can only make it as dynamic as you can with what I'm giving as far as the training. That's pretty much it. I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I'm actually really enjoying listening to your curriculum there. I wanted to bring up dry fire, and I keep having guys on that talk about how important dry fire is. I know for myself, I think this is something that keeps me sharp. I notice when I dry fire a lot at home, and then I go to the range, I'm definitely a lot more stable and, for lack of a better word, accurate. How often would you recommend to guys to dry fire at home?
As often as you can.
Okay.
And I don't, I'm not trying to be smart when I say that, but whatever your time allows. I mean, just like with anything, either you have time to do it, you have time to do it because you want to do it, or you have to set aside time to do it because it's important to you. Nobody has time to do anything these days, but yet, we can watch, 7 episodes of Tiger King, in one day. So you're going to have time for what you make time for. But just like, I'll just use myself as an example. You get hired with an agency or even I'll just use it non-law enforcement scenario. If I go buy a new holster, before I throw that gun in that holster and start going about my day, I'll wear that holster without a gun for a day or 2 around the house just to get accustomed to the location. I'll go ahead and put the gun in it, but I'll wear it around the house. And then I'll dry fire to get used to that location or that style holster, whether it's inside the waistband, outside the waistband, wearing it on your ankle as far as a primary, concealed carry citizen, or on your ankle as a backup as a law enforcement officer. You need to be proficient with that. And not everybody's got thousands of rounds to go draw and shoot. Well, that's the thing about dry fire. It literally costs you nothing. Zero ammo, double, triple check, make sure your weapon's unloaded, point it in a safe direction, in your house, and just dry fire. Watch yourself in the mirror. I'm sure my spouse and my wife thought I was crazy several times, wondering what I was doing in the bedroom, staring at myself in the mirror, drawing. But after her hearing me tell, stories of dry fire and getting proficient and that costing you nothing, it makes sense. And it makes sense to a lot of people once you start doing it. Because like I said, it doesn't cost you anything. So whether you're an officer getting ready to go on patrol for 12 hours, before you just stick that gun in your holster, just, do a couple of repetitions of, right there in front of the mirror. And then when you get home, those are free repetitions. You got to take that gun out of your holster to get undressed. Typically, you got to put the gun in the holster. So why not take an extra second and do a little bit of dry fire or dry practice, whatever term you want to use.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point about dry fire. You're going to go ahead and take that weapon out of your holster anyway. So you might as well get those 5, 6, 7 repetitions in there just to have them done.
Yeah, because if the last time I dry fired was weeks ago, and then I go on patrol and something happened, the last time I quote unquote drew my gun was 2 weeks ago, when I could have easily done it a couple of times an hour before I left the house.
Yeah.
So
yeah, now
at minimum, you're asking how often. At minimum, when you get new gear, new holster, at minimum. So
I really like that concept though of look, you're gonna unholster your weapon anyway, or look, you're sitting there watching the Tiger King, you're doing whatever, you might as well get those half a dozen reps in there. And then just get it out of the way, man. I think the more proficient you are with your tools that you carry, the better off your chances of survival will be. You mentioned your wife watching in the mirror, and then you kind of explain, this is what I'm doing. I'm sure that, she was glad that you were training yourself to preserve your life on duty.
Oh, yeah. She used to, I joke with, well, I don't think I've said it to her too often, but I tell people, like, my wife used to think I was crazy. Sitting with my back, to the wall, watching the doors, walking on certain side of the sidewalk versus the road, having my kids on the side of, like I'm left-handed, so my kids, I try to keep them on my right side, so I can clear, get my gun. There's just little things, backing into parking spots. That whole, what I take for granted of situational awareness, that it's taken years and years to master. Now me and her almost fight for certain seats at a restaurant. We fight to do certain things because she slowly learned that, okay, well, maybe he's not as crazy as I thought he was. This whole situational awareness thing is pretty accurate, for what, and she'll start to see certain things, and my kids will pick up on certain things, seeing certain people, how they act. So we kind of use it. You got kids, you can play games. Like, you get in your car, ride down the road, like, play a game. Okay, who can spot the yellow Mustang first? And you'll be surprised what you see riding down the road when you're trying to look for something specific. You'll never find a yellow Mustang when you're looking for it. But it teaches your kids to look in places they wouldn't normally look instead of being on their devices or complaining in the back seat. So you can use games with kids all the time to learn, and they don't even know that they're learning situational awareness. So.
And you mentioned about, I've had the same experience as well with girlfriends and et cetera, thinking, I'm a little bit crazy. Like you said, the combat parking, the wanting to look at the door while you're sitting in a restaurant. Over time, I think people get used to that. And then, certainly things happen, things transpire, and people actually want you there. They want that protector mentality there. They get used to having it and they like it. And we're living in the midst of a crazy situation now with this pandemic going on, man. And it's been my experience that, people in the past who have maybe, like you said, thought guys like you and I were a little bit off or a little crazy, they've been wanting to be around us, right? They've been wanting to contact us. It's not until stuff hits the fan, really, that people start taking their personal security more seriously. What is your opinion about citizens training themselves for an SHTF stuff hit the fan situation? We hear that sometimes government and whatever, they don't want people preparing too much, or they don't want modern citizens over prepared. But then we look at like the old Cold War, where it was highly encouraged to prepare and have a month worth of food and water, whatever, some ammunition. Not to say about the prepping like tinfoil hat types, but do you think it's a good idea for your average citizen to be prepared and prepared in mindset?
Yes, I do. The more prepared citizens are, as a law enforcement officer, I believe the easier our job is.
Yeah.
Just example with the whole toilet paper incident. If everybody or the majority of people, and I'm not saying I've got 5 years of toilet paper in my house, but we haven't bought toilet paper since, we haven't bought toilet paper.
Yeah.
Not that I had a ton of toilet paper prior, but we had enough that we haven't had to buy it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the grocery store, a few hours ago for our weekly grocery store shopping, and there was toilet paper on the shelf. So if I needed some today, I would have been able to get it. But when I say as far as people preparing, you don't have to have 3 years work. You don't have to have a bunker in your backyard. You don't have to have rice and beans for years and years. But think about what is a normal emergency in your area. Eastern North Carolina, we have right here in hurricanes. So, guys, girls, listening to this, if your spouse is not on board with just preparing in general, start out, hey, don't you think we need to, hurricane season is starting here, I think, like the beginning of June. So let's not, I think the longest I've been without power during a hurricane was probably 5 to 7 days. That was me personally. There's areas in this area that were, 2, 3, 4 weeks due to flooding and stuff like that. But so whatever that worst case scenario is in your area, whether it's earthquakes in California, blizzards up north, use that local disaster to start your preparedness. Mm-hmm. And if you prepared food, dry goods, toilet paper, baby wipes, if you've prepared all that for your hurricane and it's constantly stockpiled, then when something like this happens, because I think March 13th was the last day my kids were in school. So Saturday, so that Monday, there was no school. And I think that was about the time toilet paper, went crazy. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know how that began. I don't know if somebody on the news suggested that people buy toilet paper or what, but just that preparedness, that situational awareness, that building that mindset would prevent people from having to go fight each other over toilet paper.
Yeah.
And if you do have that proper mindset, you would know that toilet paper is not worth a physical altercation.
Yeah.
So that we joke, I prepare. We have stuff in our house and we're ready, for certain things, but I'm also not going to go to jail or prison over some toilet paper.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if people were prepared, then they wouldn't be in that predicament either.
Exactly. And, that's one thing I tend to say is, look, if you've already got a month worth of food and water, there's really no need for you to be at the grocery store when everyone else is rushing it to begin with. Thusly,
Yeah.
you can avoid a bad situation, and I think avoiding a bad situation is 90% of what citizens out there should be preparing to do. In other words, if you can avoid something happening, then you've won the battle. That's what Sun Tzu used to say.
Yeah, and that's yeah. So just avoiding the conflict, you've already won. Um, and obviously, the best way to avoid a fight at Walmart is to not go to Walmart.
Right.
But if you do have, and I use Walmart as not. I mean, I love Walmart. I'm not bashing Walmart, but just as an example, to avoid getting in a conflict at Walmart, don't go. But
Right.
if you have to go, just like with anything, have a plan. Have a grocery list. I'm going here. I'm getting this. If they don't have my primary items, then are there going to be replacements? Am I going to get this if they don't have that? If not, get what you need and get out. During these times, now when quote unquote life goes back to normal, then you can walk around Walmart for 3 hours shopping. But now you should only be going out to get what you need. If not, if everybody's going out there, then that's what's causing those conflicts.
Yes. And, it brings up another good point about training and preparedness is, yes, you've got your food and your water, whatever else, obviously your toilet paper stockpiled, or not stockpiled, but you've got enough of it to last you. And guys, down there in the Carolinas certainly know about hurricanes, like you said, and I thought that was an excellent point about using natural disasters for an example to, start your preparations. East here we got plenty of hurricanes. Whether that's out west, you got the earthquakes. That's a great place to start. Now, another thing that we've got to be concerned about is, unfortunately, the possibility of civil unrest. We start to see now, and my buddy Secure Mindset, Robin at Secure Mindset, he always talks about disasters going in 3 phases. Phase 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1 is kind of what we've been seeing. Phase 2 is where you start to see a little bit more civil unrest and stuff. People start protesting, things like that. Phase 3 kind of being, stuff's hit the fan and it's time to friggin' bug out, right? But, we're starting to see a little bit of civil unrest here. People are getting antsy with the quarantines and stuff. So it is important, I think, to really think about how would you tactically prepare for a civil unrest situation. Can you give us any kind of advice or any topics that we might like to think about when it comes to preparing for that type of civil unrest?
Well, just an example of the civil unrest. I mean, we've got these and they're using the term protest. I mean, and I guess that's just a generic term, but it is a protest. But I'm just using that term generically. But like I think yesterday or the day before in Michigan, the governor met with their legislation and said, hey, I want to keep the state shut down for X many more days. And the citizens in, I think, Lansing were like, no, that's not going to work. And hundreds of people in their vehicles went to the downtown area, blowing horns, causing a large disturbance. And that civil unrest, I mean, as a law enforcement officer, I mean, that's our job to, keep the peace. But there's only so many law enforcement officers out there. So I would never say that we're not going to do our job. But we also have a constitution to uphold. And we do have to keep law and order. But at a certain point, the citizens are going to have to kind of, I mean, you're your first responder anyway, yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be able to protect yourself. If you can't, then you call 911. We come there. Whether it's something other domestic, husband and wife, you handle your business. If you can't, then call 911. Whether it's the husband or wife, we'll come there and we'll try to mediate the incident. If a crime's been committed and people want to press charges, depending on the nature of what's going on, we'll effect an arrest and they'll prosecute. But that same thing. So the citizens, no matter what state, like you said, we're in that civil unrest right now where people are getting cabin fever. At what point, and you can't make everybody stay in their house, even on a local level. I mean, I've heard where officers were charging, certain people because they were at a park, or they charged a guy in California because he was on a paddle board. I mean, we can charge, and I say we, law enforcement, I mean, we can charge a person here and there, whether the public agrees with it or not. We can handle a couple of people, but we can't handle, large groups of people. Pick your incident over the years, the riots we've had, back in the 60s up till the early 90s, in Los Angeles, with Rodney King, and then the incident, in Missouri, a few years back. We can only do so much as law enforcement officers. So that's where people need to prepare. So if you have to stay home, you're not fighting because you're run out of food, because when people will kill each other. I mean, I've seen people kill each other over a pair of shoes. You don't think that somebody's not going to kill somebody over food for their kids to provide for them? So, I mean, people do crazy things when there's not an emergency. So imagine what people are willing to do when you tell them they can't do certain things. So, yeah, I think we're at that point where, and I think, and I try to stay out of politics. I mean, I have my own personal opinions, but whether you like, our president or not, or whether you like the governor you have for your state, I couldn't imagine having to make a national decision or a decision for a government. I mean, it's hard enough to be a protector for a wife and two kids, and then being a guy on the patrol, having to make decisions, life and death decisions. So I can't imagine putting myself in a national position. So no matter what our president does or your governor does, half the people are going to agree with it, and half the people are going to think it's stupid.
Yeah.
But at some point, yes, it's unfortunate that lives have been lost. I hate to use the word conspiracy, but there's more to this virus than I think meets the eye as far as, how it got here or why it got here. I'm not even going to touch that one, but at some point, and I'm not saying we need to open up business because of the economy, but there's going to be civil unrest to the point that they're not going to be able to, they're going to have to open up the country. So whether you like it or not, it's at that point where, and I think that's why states and even the president's starting to say, okay, we need to go ahead and the numbers are down, whether you agree with them or not. We need to go ahead and start doing something.
Yeah, and I completely agree with 100% of what you just said. And I know that, you may not want to open up a can of worms here, and I respect that. But from my end, I'm going to say this virus, in my personal opinion, is probably some type of form of biological warfare, whether that's simply, hey, we know now that this actually came from a lab and it escaped, or something else. I won't speculate, but this is what it is, and you're absolutely right that I think that is why we're starting to see the country start thinking about reopening again, is less for the fact that our economy, and I think that, look, you said, regardless of your opinion of the leaders in charge, I think that they are astute enough to realize that we are in that phase where we are starting to see some civil unrest and some protests and some things happen, and we really need to be diligent that doesn't go too far. So I think that's why we are starting to open things back up, even on a limited basis. And I just wanted to bring that point up, that I'm with you 100% on that, and I think a lot of guys are starting to come there. Even the mainstream news is starting to say, look, this isn't, some wet market thing. This very well may have been, in some way, shape, or form, a deliberate type of virus. So,
I just want to add something real quick. So, us as a law enforcement officer, and I'm only going to speak for North Carolina, there are certain so just because we charge somebody with a crime doesn't necessarily mean we agree with the fact that that crime or that whatever you did is a crime. Whether it's, I'll just use marijuana, that's kind of a hot topic as far as legal or not legal. So whether, so right now I tell people, like, whether I condone or not condone you smoking marijuana. Right now it's illegal. And until it's not, this is what you can be charged with. Now, the flip side of that is we, as law enforcement officers, have that discretion on certain crimes, whether we charge or not. So just because I conduct a traffic stop and get a little nickel bag of weed or whatever small amount, doesn't mean, and I'm just using marijuana as an example, doesn't mean I have to charge you with it. So just so everybody listening knows that just because an officer charges somebody with violating a stay-at-home order, and another can of worms I don't want to open, like, we're here to defend the Constitution. Mm-hmm. But, the Second Amendment is within that realm of, things that have been violated over the years.
Yes.
Do I agree that you should have to take a class in North Carolina to carry concealed legally? No. And until they don't do it, and I'm not teaching that class to make money, I'm just teaching it to provide a service for the citizens. So until, that certain things change from the top down, we have certain things that we, certain laws that we enforce or are required to enforce. So whether that officer wanted to arrest somebody for violating that order, it may not have been ultimately up to him. He's a person. He's got a family to provide for, and I hate to use the term, he's got a job to do. But obviously in his eyes, he thought what he was doing was right, and he effected that arrest, and that guy will have his day in court. So, but at the same time, we have the discretion to not charge them just because I, quote unquote, catch you violating a stay-at-home order doesn't mean I have to charge you with it. So luckily every state's different. Some states' stay-at-home orders are a little bit more lenient than others, except for my schedule at work. My life, I don't go out to eat as often as I used to. But my life, except for my kids being at home every day, not being in school, my life hasn't really changed that much. And I hate, I know there's been lives lost because of this virus, but it hasn't affected everybody the way that the news, I think, has projected it. We've all been affected, obviously. But I think this is, if you don't take this incident to heart and use it to never get caught without toilet paper, to never get caught without supplies, then you didn't learn your lesson. Whether you agree with a stay-at-home order or not, you should take this incident and appreciate everything you have in the future. Whether it's women getting their hair done at the salons that have been shut down, going out to eat without having to get it takeout, your kids being in school, appreciating the teachers, the nurses, the medical staff. So just because my life may have not been turned upside down, there's people that have lost their livelihoods because of it. So at minimum, I hope everybody has learned to be a little bit more prepared. And in that preparedness is that mindset. This is your mindset class that isn't, that you can take. The takeaway from this is a mindset. How were you affected, and how will you not be affected next time because you hopefully learn from your mistakes?
Yeah, and learning from your mistakes is a big thing, and that's a big part of not just warriors out there, but everybody. And you have to learn from your mistakes and also other people's mistakes, which is why I think that, listening to AAR's after-action reports from guys who have been there and done it and been through it and survived is so valuable and so important. Like you were saying at the beginning of the podcast, man, learn as much as you can from other incidents that have previously happened and take it and put it in your toolkit. Be able to use it when you need that.
Yep.
And I just want to bring up real quick, we're getting close to the mark here, but I do want to bring it up is, you were talking about the infringement on the Second Amendment rights, and I won't open this can of worms either. However, I do want to just say that, we see things like the Virginia incident where the governor has utilized this particular unfortunate pandemic to, instate further restrictions and further, some say, highly unconstitutional laws And we see militias being formed out there, and things right before this pandemic were getting bad as far as that goes. But a lot of cops I've met, in fact most, are some of the biggest proponents of the Second Amendment out there. Now, obviously, you guys are paid to enforce the law, whatever that law may be, and I just want citizens to really understand that guys like yourself out there, you're walking the line and you are doing what you need to do, but like you said, you may not agree with it, and you do have discretion in some cases to go ahead and do what you need to do. But for guys out there, look, cops out there walking the beat are generally on the side of constitutionality and freedom and all of the Americana stuff that we love and hold dear. So I do want to bring that up. And another thing I want to bring up kind of before we wrap up here is church security. I did really want to touch on this because it is fascinating to me. We've seen a couple of instances where church security guards have literally saved the lives of maybe most of the parishes that they protect. Can you tell us a little bit about what this entails as far as church security goes?
As far as what we offer, or just
absolutely. As far as what you guys
of why a church should have security.
No. I think we kind of are starting to understand why a church needs security, and also starting to kind of understand that even just citizens out there being armed is a really good thing. We've seen that work out very favorably. But what do you guys offer as far as your church security course goes?
Well, obviously we offer a consultation. So whether it's I'm contacting a church to say, hey, this is me, this is my business, this is what we offer. Can I come, like a sales pitch almost, or whether it's a church comes to us and say, hey, we were referred to you by this other church, or we, saw some information on Facebook about, you doing this, what you offer. Basically, we set up kind of like a package deal where you'd be surprised how many churches, well, you may or may not be surprised that how many churches already have security teams versus how many don't. And I don't know the statistics, but there are a lot of churches that don't for whatever reason. And then there's a lot that do. The ones that do obviously have their church's best interest in mind. However, how they set it up may not have been the most, whether it's financial way to have done it or the most efficient way to have done it. So just, and I'm going to bash myself for a little bit, but just because somebody's in law enforcement doesn't mean that they're top flight security and they know everything about everything. So just because you're a law enforcement officer that goes to a church, if they come to you and say, hey, I know you're a cop, do you mind starting a security team? If he's not, depending on what his job was, if he hasn't done research and find out why certain things need to be put in place, he may not be your best way to do it. So we can come in there and start from the ground up and say, hey, this is what we suggest as far as communication, safety. Not everybody on a security team has to carry a gun, and not a whole security team is not all just about security. You could have off-duty paramedics, nurses. You could be dealing with medical emergencies. I mean, medical. I'm a big proponent of medical training. I've probably saved more lives with medical training than I have with a firearm. And not everybody thinks like that or carries medical equipment. Whether it's something like a tourniquet or just having a first aid kit or a trauma kit in their vehicle or whatever. But so setting up a team. Communication, whether you're verbally talking to each other, or you're going to spend money and buy radios, all of that is really should be at the bottom of the totem pole as far as that type of equipment. Setting up a kind of a chain of command, schedule the teams, training as a group. So just because you got 10 guys that want to be on the team or on your security detail, only half of them may have concealed carry permits. And then out of those 5, do they even carry when they're at church? So the biggest thing is starting with that mindset, having a discussion with the pastor or the pastoral team as me as an instructor or a business owner come in and say, hey, this is what I suggest. you have to be on board with people carrying guns on the property. Are they going to be concealed, or how is your security going to be? Is it going to be a kind of a covert where everybody looks like just normal people, or do you want to put a couple of guys in T-shirts that say security on it? Because they both have their pros and cons. Are you going to have people standing at the front door with earpieces in, and like I said, with the T-shirts that say security, or is it going to be more, covert where you really don't know? So you got to discuss it with them. So that's once you discuss it with the pastors of what their vision is, and then sometimes you have to say, look, you're the pastor, I know you're the boss, but my niche is security, and even though you don't like this is why I think you should. So you're selling a product, to a church, and you got to have different levels of, what are your expectations? So the people that don't have any training, you got to get them training. And just because somebody has had their concealed carry permit, that may be the only time they've ever shot a gun, and it may have been 10 years ago. So offering them, hey, we'll do a private, defensive handgun class just for your security team. Let's get medical training. Is everybody CPR certified? Do you have a kids program? How are you going to set up where these security personnel are going to be at? And at the same time, they're obviously coming to church for their own personal reasons. So you can't have them working every day, or every time the church is open. So you have to set up teams to where every so often they have a day off to where they can go get fed, by the Lord. Because you can't be, if you think about the color code, Jeff Cooper's color code, you can't be in orange and red all the time. Every time you're at church, you have to kind of back it down a little bit and take some time off at the same time. So you have to take turns, rotate, have a schedule. So basically you're selling a product to a church, but you're giving them, package A, package B, and package C. Not necessarily, one costs more than the other. You're just offering different packages based on what they think they need, and then you explain to them the pros and cons of each one. So,
damn, dude, I'm really glad I asked that question. That was solid information there, man. Dude, I want to just thank you again for coming on, man. It's been a freaking pleasure. I could keep talking to you for probably another hour, to be honest, man. I got to cut this at some point, but
no, you're fine.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure, man.
Maybe we'll do a part 2.
I'd love to. I really would.
All right.
Now, how can guys go ahead and get in touch with you? And by the way, just before I want you to put that out there, I highly recommend that if you're anywhere around Phillip, that you get in touch with him, because this guy knows his stuff. And I don't say that about all of our guests, but I just want to put that out there, dude. You know what you're talking about. How can guys get in touch with you?
We're not too active on social media. I mean, we have social media accounts. Recently, it's just been a lot of word of mouth. So just if you go on Facebook, just look up Neuss River Tactical on Facebook. Right now, we don't have any active schedules. We're just doing private classes right now due to our states, trying to keep, groups of 10 or more people away from each other. So we're doing private classes right now. So if you're interested in a private class, just send us a message on Facebook, or you can email me at newsrivertactical@gmail.com. We're on Instagram. Not too active on there, but I do check it. It's more for entertainment. But Neuse_river_tactical on Instagram. That's pretty much it. Just Facebook. I think I have a website, but it hasn't been updated in forever. So that's something I need to get on. Like I said, I'm a full-time law enforcement officer, and just kind of do this part-time. So I advertise as needed, I guess. So
yeah, and it's tough to keep up on websites. I know from personal experience. I've got 2 of them right now, and I'm building a 3rd, and it's freaking tough to keep up with that stuff.
Yeah, so just looks up on Facebook. Sometimes we post funny pictures. Sometimes we'll post events as far as our North Carolina concealed carry class. I keep using the term defensive handgun class. We've actually changed the name to a Gunfighter 1, and then Gunfighter 2. So that just is more for marketing purposes, but it's just a defensive handgun class.
Okay.
And you don't have to, we've had active duty military personnel. We're probably about an hour and a half from like Fort Bragg, Fayetteville area. I've had a couple of active duty military guys come in. They just don't get a lot of pistol training, depending on their job. Retired, military come in. I've had, co-workers, other law enforcement officers come in that just, because in North Carolina, you have to qualify once a year. Now, some agencies do twice a year. Some agencies with bigger budgets may do it, 3 or 4 times a year. But unless you're on an active, SWAT team, if you're just regular patrol guy, if you don't go get the training yourself, you're only going to shoot about once a year. So I'll have, patrol guys come in, they'll run a defensive handgun course. They'll come in, take multiple classes. One class, they'll run it in their duty rig. And then another day they'll come in and run it, like an off-duty concealed carry capacity.
And I just want to put it out there that it's so important for guys to continuously train. So, maybe taking that Gunfighter 1, then take the Gunfighter 2. Hey, maybe then go, like you're saying, take Gunfighter 1 again at some point, just to keep yourself sharp. Yeah.
Yep. And get medical training. We don't offer the medical training as often as we used to. The guy that was the head of that, we've kind of just went our own ways. But if you're interested in it, I know people. We can make it happen. But yeah, get medical training. If not me, from somebody else, reputable training. Just look up trauma classes in your area. Ask around. Everybody wants to ask people's advice on Facebook, so ask Facebook. Who you should go train with. But take everything anybody says with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Do your research, because there's 100 people out there that teach the same type of classes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and find a reputable teacher.
Guys
like Phillip who have been out there and doing it are definitely the best type of instructors to learn from. So, yeah, Phillip, I want to thank you again, man, for coming on. I'm going to close it out here with my usual spiel that you are your first and last line of defense. Remember that, guys. Stay safe out there. Don't take any more risks than you need to right now. Also, definitely get in touch with Phillip at Neuse River Tactical. Check him out on Instagram, Facebook, and send him a message if you're interested in some solid freaking training. So until next time, I will see you guys on the next podcast. Phillip, cheers, man.